by for Wyoming Hookin Huntin Outdoors with your host, Drew Kirby.
Hey, this is Luke Holmes.
I am Morgan Wallen.
I'm Riley Green.
I'm Travis Denning.
Hey, I'm Aaron Lewis.
Hey, it's Luke Bryan.
I'm Tim McGraw.
What's up? This is Ian Munsick.
Wyoming Hookin Huntin Outdoors.
It's Wyoming Hookin Huntin Outdoors. Been a great summer. The summer is behind us. Janet, we have made it into September, which means there's a lot of folks that are out and about doing a lot of hunting and fishing and all kinds of fun as we kick off Labor Day weekend.
That's right. It is such a fantastic time to get out. You know, it's fall's one of my favorite seasons. And I think it's the same for a lot of people as it starts to get a little bit cooler. And of course, we're all encouraged to get outside due to kind of our hunting season. So whether people are out scouting or whether they're actually hunting for a harvest, it is lots of folks in the field time. My
plan is to do a lot of camping and being outdoors for the next couple of months because I feel like the early fall is going to be a great time weather-wise to do that. But one thing that I have always, since I was a kid, made sure I had was sunscreen and bug spray. And bug spray is one of those things that really is important about what we're talking today because of this West Nile virus that has really kind of plagued us here again in Wyoming.
That's right. It's nothing new this year, Drew. We have different cases of West Nile virus across the state every year. And we have Jessica Jennings-Gaines with us today, who is the supervisor for the Wyoming Game and Fish Department Wildlife Health Lab, who's going to talk to us a little bit about what is going on with West Nile virus in our population of wildlife. And of course, just as a reminder, Game and Fish is not a human health agency. And so we want to refer any of those questions or people who have been interested there to the state health department or your local health department. They have all sorts of fantastic information. So yes, definitely take your bug spray, but we're here to talk about birds.
And Jessica, thanks again for coming on. Congratulations. You're in a new chair now than the last time we spoke with you. But the West Nile is... what birds does it really affect here in Wyoming?
Thanks, Drew. So first of all, West Nile virus, it kind of, the reservoir for West Nile virus is birds, wild birds, usually like songbirds, you know, and most of those are going to be asymptomatic. They're going to carry it. They're going to allow those mosquitoes to pick it up and transmit it to other things, mostly birds. And you're never going to notice they're not going to be sick or anything. But there are certain species of birds which are very susceptible to getting some of those clinical signs, getting the encephalitis, and succumbing to this disease. And most susceptible are corvids. So corvids are going to be your crows, your ravens, your jays. For some reason, they're very susceptible. And that's what we're getting a lot of calls on so far this summer. A lot of those in-town crows, ravens, where folks are seeing them. Also, raptors can be very susceptible, owls, sage grouse, we believe, although sage grouse seem to be susceptible to a lot of things. But those are the birds that you're probably going to most likely see it in. I will say we had a case this summer. I wasn't aware, but we had some pelicans that were found dead over on Seminole Reservoir. We brought them in. Our concern was maybe an algal bloom, which we also have a lot of in this time of the year. But turns out pelicans are also very susceptible to West Nile virus. So,
wow.
So yeah, there's more species than maybe we're on our radar, but those are kind of the ones to keep your eyes out for.
So we had mentioned just a few minutes ago that a lot of hunting seasons kicked off, and that includes bird season, like dove season and wild turkey season are now in full swing. Are any of the game birds that someone would go out and harvest, they susceptible as much to West Nile?
Potentially, I did look up ringneck pheasants. There have been some reports of those getting West Nile virus. You would probably see some clinical signs in those. And again, transmission is usually from those mosquitoes. So definitely be wearing your bug spray. You're going to be out in that area where if we do have it in the birds, it could be transmitted to you. Honestly, every mammal has a potential to get West Nile virus. Humans have the potential. We just had a squirrel test positive in Cheyenne. The thing is, these mosquitoes tend to stick to birds, But when we're getting a high population of mosquitoes, they'll move on to other hosts. So, they could be getting on out of the normal population and into new things.
The West Nile virus, is it carried by every type of mosquito, or are there certain mosquitoes that will carry it more than others?
It tends to be in a species that fall under the culex, and those mosquitoes tend to hatch out later in the summer. So late summer, early fall. So the mosquitoes that you're seeing in the spring, early summer that are hatching out don't tend to carry West Nile virus. And I believe a lot of the municipalities in Wyoming do mosquito pool testing. So, we've added, when West Nile first came to the United States, it was a huge deal. Had some very large effects. And then most of these municipalities started spraying for mosquitoes, which Casper probably does. I know Laramie does in the evenings in the alleys. That's really knocked down the mosquito populations and has really knocked down the prevalence of West Nile virus.
So, but like you might imagine, if you're out in the middle of nowhere, the mosquitoes probably haven't been sprayed for. And maybe not every municipality, like Jessica mentioned, does spray for them. So it's a great awareness for people to know. And again, public health agencies are an awesome place for all of that as well. But what the Wyoming Game and Fish Department is really asking here is for people just to be aware of sage grouse. If you see some of these grouse while you're out hunting in the middle of nowhere, we would love to have you let us know. Whether you are picking that up and sending it in to us for sampling, whether you're just calling the game warden or local biologist and saying, hey, this is what we're seeing. We always track every year. We ask the public to do this. So this is nothing new, but we always track sage grouse populations and how West Nile virus might be affecting them. Because like Jessica mentioned, for some reason, they are very susceptible to the disease.
When someone is out and about, what are they looking for? I mean, because you mentioned earlier that you really can't tell, but if a bird has the West Nile, what is someone looking for?
Normally, some of the signs that you can see in a bird that it's sick, well, a lot of times you'll just find a bird that has died, no outward sign of any trauma, possibly like it just fell out of a tree. But if it is alive, they'll have some clinical signs, a lot of neurologic signs. So they could have some head tilt. They could have some coordination issues. They may have some issues flying. Just down on the ground, humans can kind of get near them. We did have a couple in town that had some diarrhea. These can be signs of other issues as well, but, if we do get them in and test them, we can kind of piece that out. But normally, neurologic signs, anything acting a little off could be.
And if someone finds one of these birds, what's the best way to handle this? Because obviously there may be concerns about, if it's sick, then can I get sick off of this? And what route should they take?
Yeah, there's always that concern because, we've been dealing with highly pathogenic avian influenza over the last 2 years here in Wyoming. And that seems to have calmed down for the moment. We're not getting, haven't had a positive since April, but you never know when that might come back through with migrating birds. So that's always a good thing to keep in mind. Your safest bet is always call the Regional Game and Fish Office, and they can send someone out, because they can tell potentially if it was trauma related, if it's sick to the point that it needs to be euthanized, Game and Fish can take care of that. And then we can get some more info to determine if we need to bring it in for testing or, if we've already documented West Nile virus in your area, we probably don't need to test 10 more crows because we're pretty aware that that's probably what's going around. And we can dispose of it. Or if you give us a call, we can let you know if you can just dispose of it. And we always recommend that, touching any dead animal, always wear gloves, always kind of protect yourself, because you never know what kind of germs are out there. And you can just bag it up and dispose of it in your normal household trash.
Well, and I feel that there are a lot of people that have heard about West Nile and don't really know a lot about the virus, but can humans get it? Yes. And can they get it directly from these birds? Will it pass on to the bird? It
shouldn't, no. Not picking it up, touching it. Again, it's a vector transmitted bloodborne disease, mostly transmitted through Mosquitoes, again, you could potentially get it if you had a blood transfusion, and someone had it in their blood. If you had an organ replacement, things like that. But not normally. Here in the lab, we test the brain of these animals. So that's probably a little more exposure that you would not have out in the field. So relatively, really low risk. You really need to get it through a vector.
So wearing bug spray, making sure that standing water around your house is all taken care of, and everything that your grandpas and grandmas and parents told you to do to keep mosquitoes away, do it.
Exactly.
Except for don't paint your walls with DEET. I think that was in there somewhere. Like they would mix
that one went out after a while.
Yeah. Let's not do that one. But for reals, it is a great thing. And there are so many great options that are out there now for personal protection from mosquitoes, things like the thermocells and great, gazebos that are made of screens and all those sorts of things. And so it's pretty easy. And I know that the Department of Health has a great website that talks a lot about West Nile and humans. But, again, sage grouse is kind of where we're looking for Wyoming Game and Fish Department at this point. And we just hope that folks can continue to help us in our surveillance across Wyoming of all sorts of diseases.
Absolutely. And of course, we mentioned that there are some seasons that are in now, and sage grouse comes in September 16th in the Casper region. So definitely be very on the look when you're out hunting this year.
Absolutely. And just give us a call anytime. We're just here to help.
It's Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.
Here we are, Brian, in September, and I think I see a little different expression on your face. It may be excitedness, it may be happiness.
Well, it's a great time of year for anyone that likes to be outside, so yes, I enjoy it.
I think we're getting to the point, waking up this past week, a couple of mornings, it was a little bit crisp, and almost like fall was trying to move in already, and the elk seasons and a lot of the pheasant and dove and all the bird seasons are coming in, and it really is a good time to come in and make sure that you've got everything. We've talked to you all summer about being prepared for this day, but then there are some folks that have kind of dragged their feet.
Yeah, this weekend's kind of one of those strange weekends for opening weekend of hunting season, but it's also kind of like the last hurrah for summer camping, and a lot of people out there running side by sides up on the mountain trails. So you're kind of interacting, as a hunter with a lot of people that are just out playing also. So kind of creates some different dynamics for this first weekend of hunting. But a lot of people are just gearing up, buying coolers, getting stuff ready that they know that they're going to need, especially with this warmer weather. You got to make sure that they're taking care of those animals once they get them down. Yeah,
and that's a big concern for a lot of folks, especially if maybe you're not spending a lot of time out in the wild or out in the bush or whatever, but just transporting that meat. I mean, sitting in the back of a truck for a 30-minute drive is not good.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's, and a lot of times, guys have multiple antelope tags or, multiple deer tags or whatever it is. And so they might shoot one in the morning and then maybe drive around the rest of the day looking for another one. And, having that animal sit in the back of your truck, especially when it's 75, 80 degrees outside, is tough. So having a good cooler, have a good plan, have some ice packs, whatever it is. If you're going to debone the animal, whether you got a big enough cooler where you can actually put a quarter in, taking care of those animals is critical so that, they're actually going to taste good when you get them processed.
So there are a lot of folks, we talked about the fact that some of the upland bird game, they're open, and I believe sage grouse comes in a couple of weeks, but you guys carry a lot of bird hunting gear here, and that's, one thing that is different with hunting is you almost have to have something different for every animal you hunt.
Yeah, this weekend is opening day of dove season in most areas, and so that's kind of exciting in itself because, we haven't had that big cold snap to push all these doves out of the area. So I'm kind of excited that, we might actually have a pretty good couple of weeks of dove season, and we've got all the mojo flyers and the little standing decoys and that type of stuff to kind of help increase your success rates during dove season.
I know the last couple of years getting shotgun shells was a little concerning for some folks, but I mean, your shelves are full of ammo at this point.
Yeah, we're set up really good for waterfowl season and for the bird seasons that are coming up. just about, every caliber and every shot size that a guy could possibly want. 410 ammo is still a little bit tough. We got some in this last week, but I think we're going to be in real good shape this year.
So once you get that dove, let's say, and I know that jalapeno with a dove breast wrapped in bacon is, maybe some cream cheese.
Right, yeah.
That's pretty good, but it's really good if you put it on a smoker.
It's one of my favorite ways to do it. And just like you said, kind of wrap them in a little bacon, just make little finger foods, little appetizers, and doesn't take long on the trigger, and they definitely taste good.
One thing that we've talked a little bit about, too, is if you haven't purchased your hunting license in a year, you probably ought to get on that.
Yeah, definitely check that. If with waterfowl season coming up, we did get our first batch of duck stamps in, so they're the same price as they always have been. Same price you pay at the post office, just a little more convenient. Swing on in and get those. We're gonna have we've got all the ORV tags, snowmobile passes are coming in soon. Hopefully we don't need that too soon, but we've got all those licenses and tags, ORV tags, duck stamps, all that kind of stuff. If you're out in the field archery hunting, make sure you have your archery stamp. That's one that guys tend to forget a little bit. Come on in. We're 8 to 8 Monday through Saturday and Sunday 9 to 6.
All right, so don't miss out on any of the fun this fall out in the field. You can get started right here at Rocky Mountain Discount Sports.
It's Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.
And we're back. It's Brian and Drew. Brian, of course, from Rocky Mountain Discount Sports and the Wyoming Walleye Stampede, which wrapped up a couple of weeks ago. Things looking pretty good now. You're a little stress-free and being able to do some fishing on your own.
Yeah, it's nice to have those tournaments over with. A lot of planning and preparation and great participation. So a lot of guys, needing stuff throughout the season. But yeah, this is one of the best times of year, especially for a guy like me that didn't draw any elk tags.
Yeah.
I mean, we got a couple leftover cow tags, but that's only going to be like a 1 week type of deal. And some of the best fishing is just coming up. The water's dropping at Glendo, and that spooning bite's really kicking in. A lot of jigging wraps and spoons. We talked. Jay had his little championship wrapped up last week, and although the fishing was tough, there's still some guys catching some nice quality fish out of Pathfinder. And then our boys event, a lot of guys catching numbers of fish. We had a 17-inch minimum, so if you want to get up to boys in, the water levels are holding out great there. That fall bite up there turns in pretty good as well. A lot of jigging wraps and that kind of stuff, and a real good troll bite on that south end. So there's lots of great places if you're still chasing walleye. Boys, and I know a lot of guys were still catching some big old trout, 4 and 5 pounders. So that's always produces some great ones up there.
Well, that was one of the things that Jay and I were talking a little bit about was it's interesting how you can be on one end of the boat and I can be on the other end of the boat doing the exact same thing, fishing the exact same thing, and not catching the other. And that kind of was what he said during the Boys In tournament was he would be running the same thing that these guys that were pulling out minimum of 17, and they couldn't hit anything, but they go 100 feet the other way and start a different presentation, and then they're catching, and it's so interesting.
I mean, there's usually something that somebody's doing that you might think that you're fishing next to a guy and you think that you're doing the same presentation, but there's guys that really figure, kind of fine tune, like the pulling cranks, for instance. You might think you have 100 feet of line out, but you might only have 70 because maybe your line counter is not calibrated, or it's not giving you the correct reading. Maybe you're running a half a mile slower than the other guy. Depth and color of the lure, the speed of what you're doing. I watched a lot of guys out there that were kind of running S turns, and so a lot of guys will pull those cranks in an S turn, and then they'll really focus on, okay, well, did I get the bite on the inside rod or did I get it on the outside rod? If I got it on the inside rod and I was set at 2 miles an hour, when I make that S turn, that inside rod is going slower than 2 miles an hour now because you're kind of dragging it. But the outside rod might be going 2.2, 2.3. So paying attention to those little details, it makes, and I've been there. I mean, like I said, I think that I'm right next to a guy and we're in the same depth of water, and I'm watching how many times he cranks his reel in to, kind of get an idea of how far back he was. And, there's always something different that a guy's doing. And a lot of times, even, in the past, I mean, a number 4 shad wrap or flicker shad, it might produce 10 times better than a number 5 or 7. So sometimes it's just size, sometimes it is color, a lot of times it's speed, a lot of times it's how deep you're pulling them.
And, one of the great parts about almost every angler that I've met is there's never been a guy that wouldn't ever try something, right? If someone else said, well, I caught this fish on this, you should try that. You may not try it right in front of them, but you will eventually be like, well, I'm not catching crap. Let's go ahead and try whatever.
Yeah, and I've always come to the conclusion that it's always hard fishing somebody else's bite, right?
Yeah, right.
So, I'm real confident in certain presentations that I do, and me and you've been out there. I'm catching fish and you're not, or you're catching fish and I'm not, or what. And there's always something just slightly different,
Right.
And a lot of times, you start watching that person, and when we're pitching plastics, this last year it seemed like once that plastic hit the bottom, that it needed like a 1 second pause. And so you'd let it sit there, kind of settle, let the dust settle around that jig, and then you'd pop it back up. And that's when the fish were there. And so there's always some kind of, difference that you're doing or somebody else is doing that's probably helping them be a little bit better. And chasing somebody else's bite might give you an idea of where the bite is on the lake, but trying to chase their presentation sometimes just is tough.
But now that is all, kind of behind you, and you can get out and leisure fish, if you want to call it that. If you're going out on, say, Saturday, and it's going to be 80 in the afternoon, but it's starting at like 55 in the morning,
right?
We're into that kind of spring feel again.
These dog days of summer where the afternoons are, get pretty hot. I try to avoid fishing those. Let the play boaters be out there and the jet skiers and all that kind of stuff. If you just wanted to go like Pathfinder from 5 to 8, 6 to 8, it's probably going to be your best time. The fishing in general kind of slows down, at least for the walleyes. They tend to be a little more active in those morning and evening hours.
We've talked about this a lot. As a matter of fact, since we started the show, don't let the weather determine what you're going to do. If you feel like fishing, go fishing. Yeah,
I went and shot trap yesterday, and the guy that went with me, he goes, well, it's going to be pretty windy. And same thing. I told him, I'm like, well, if we plan on what we're going to be doing based on the weather, we wouldn't be up here. And we went up and shot for 3 hours and had a great time.
Did he teach anything?
Yeah, we got quite a few good pointers. Skeet's a lot different than trap, and it's definitely a little bit different than sporting clays. So, of course, I keep a shotgun in my hand quite regularly through the winter months, and feel like I'm a pretty good shot. But when it comes to shooting the skeet and that type of stuff, it's a little more challenging, a little bit faster paced, and but I think it's definitely going to help me moving into the duck and goose season.
All right. Well, if you are bird hunting, if you're elk hunting, or if you're out fishing, make sure to stop in here first at Rocky Mountain Discount Sports.
It's Wyoming Hookin Huntin Outdoors.
It's Wyoming Hookin Huntin Outdoors. We do appreciate you tuning in. Of course, you can go to our app and listen to this show anytime on demand. We have Jay Fountain with us this morning. And Jay, you have been running the Walleye League for the Wyoming Hunters and Fishermen. This is your year number 2. Was the second year a little better than the first year?
Fishing-wise, yeah. We didn't have exactly the same amount of people this year. So a lot of people had softball or football and stuff with their families already going on.
Right, and that gets to be, kind of rough because everybody wants to be able to come out and fish, but, real life kind of gets in the way. But every week there were some great fish caught. You just had your championship last week, and how'd things turn out?
It was actually really good. We had a total of 13 boats that made the championship, and to make the championship, you had to at least fish 5 weeks out of 10. The championship went really well. It was 8 hours of fishing. There was quite a few fish caught. The biggest was a 25-inch walleye.
The league bounced back between Alcova and Pathfinder. You ended up having a championship at Pathfinder. Did you see a lot of difference between the two reservoirs throughout the summer?
Yes, very much so. There's a boatload of fish at Pathfinder. There is very good quality fish at Alcoba, just few and far between. Unless you are on the right spot at Alcoba, you're going to have a tough time catching walleye there. And then as long as you've got a basic jig and a worm over at Pathfinder, you can catch any size of walleye. It doesn't have a set size.
You and I have gone out and we fished it at Pathfinder, and we were catching, 14 to, 15 to 16-inch fish. And then, you get the almond trouts that, they ended up whacking some big ones out there at Pathfinder.
Yeah, this year they got a couple big ones, especially Kayla almond trout. 6 years old and caught a 31.25-inch walleye.
Now, that ended up being the biggest fish of the league, right?
Yeah, of the year, that's the biggest fish.
The almond trout family came out and fished quite a few of them and ended up taking the championship.
Yes, they did. They they won the big fish pot and the overall pot.
So they definitely got that Pathfinder fishing figured out.
There's some other people that have it in the bank too, but it's just this late in the year, it's a tough bite, and it just depends on where you're at.
Running this tournament, has it opened your eyes a little bit to how many people are so passionate about, walleye fishing? I know that you're a walleye fisherman yourself. You were in the Wyoming Walleye Stampede, but seeing week to week the amount of people that are so dedicated to coming out and fish, and it's got to be part of the reason you keep doing the league.
It's actually surprising how many people were bummed that they couldn't be there this year. Doing it every other week and being able to do it at 2 different lakes, there's a certain set of teams that will always be at the Alcoba one, but won't be at the Pathfinder one. If I could, I would hold it everywhere throughout the state. That way, everybody could get a chance to participate. And doing it the way that we're doing it, it builds a lot of camaraderie for the consistent teams that show up. Really good group of people. Most of the people that showed up this year were the same that hit 10 weeks last year. So it's pretty sweet.
One of the things that you do with the Wild Hunters and Fishermen Walleye League is kids are a big part of it. And Jay, I know you want to make sure that the future of hunting and fishing is present here in Wyoming. And by allowing the kids to get in, I think it really is a family ordeal. And I think that means a lot to a lot of families to be able to bring their kids out and let them participate.
It makes it a lot more fun whenever you throw some kids in there and get them competing. My kids had a lot of fun competing against the almond trout kids, and so it's a good time for the kids.
And during summertime, obviously, the kids don't have the schedules as much as they normally do. But next summer, you're going to do the Wild Hunters and Fishermen Walleye League again, and obviously, people will have a little time to kind of prepare and get ready to go. And I know there's a lot of people that you want to thank for the great season that you had.
I got some sponsors up here that no matter what, every year they're going to be there and you can count on them. And the main sponsor this year is Wagner's, Sean Wagner over at Wagner's Outdoor Outfitters, Bob Maxwell with On the Hook Towing, Pat Gender with Addie's Hunting. He does a lot for the veterans. And we've got Euro Crown. He's putting up some pretty cool stuff for kids. Derek with On Point Hot Shot out of Douglas. Of course, Sloan's General Store. Aaron Sell with 307 Hydrographics. And then we actually got you, Hookin Huntin Outdoors. Picked you guys up this year. And then huge shout out to Pathfinder Boat and Fishing Club. Rick's Customs, he does all of our hats and hoodies and plaques. And even the Stampede threw in for a shootout this year too. So that was pretty cool.
Jay, we appreciate what you did all summer long and everything you do with Wild Hunters and Fishermen. And good luck out there in the field this fall.
I appreciate you guys, man. Thank you.
It's Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.
Welcome back to Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors. I know we're into the first part of September, which means there are lots of hunters that are out and about, out in the field, and then throughout the rest of fall and early part of 2024, a lot of elk hunters and deer hunters and antelope hunters and moose hunters and bear hunters all will be out and going for that big game to fill the freezer. And you know, if you shoot an animal and you have problems finding that animal, that could be the biggest fear that a hunter has. You don't want to maim an animal. You don't want to hurt an animal. You don't want to not be able to find an animal. So you got to find it. So what do? You can call Rocky Mountain Big Game Recovery. And we have Scott Gillespie with us. And Scott, we always like talking to you and appreciate you coming on.
Thanks a lot for having me, Drew.
Now, you guys have been in business for a few years now, and it's really nice to look at the webpage, which is RockyMountainBigGameRecovery.org, and see that the number of those trackers is really growing. You're up to 17 different trackers now.
Actually, we have about 25 trackers that are members of the organization. 17 of them, I believe, wanted to have their contact information on our map, which is on our website. I have we have three trackers that came from east of the Mississippi River that are actually going to be out here helping us try to recover some of these big game animals here in the month of September.
Wow. So they're coming from all over the United States to be part of this group. And, you know, the hunting situation here in the Rocky Mountain region is the best in the country. There's no doubt about it, because there's so many opportunities for people to hunt big game. And since you guys have been doing this, what species of animal has been the biggest that you guys have had to go in and track?
It's across the board, you know. Very, very rarely do I get an antelope call. You know, I think I maybe this will be my 6th year of doing this, and I maybe have only done 2. And the reason is usually antelope go down pretty easy once they've been hit. Plus, they're in wide open country, so
right.
Even if they run a mile and fall over, you really don't need to call in a tracker to find them. September, it's primarily elk. I get my fair share of mule deer calls too. Once September's over and we get into October and we start to get into the deer rut, the phone starts ringing again, you know, at the end of October and through November. And I've actually done tracks as late as January on elk, late season elk. So it kind of depends on the time of the year which animal that we get the most calls for.
When you go out, and I know that you have done a splendid job with your dogs and making sure that your dogs are trained up, and you guys have a really good recovery rate, don't you?
Yeah, you know, if you know, when we get phone calls from hunters that need help, you know, I got a list of questions that I start asking guys, and it can take me 15, 20 minutes to interview a hunter, you know, and determine if I think that it's a lethal hit. I have the time to possibly go out there and do the recovery. You know, the percentage rate across the nation of guys doing this is about 40%. I would say that on average, I might be running as high as 50 and 60% on recovery. But if I did take every track, it would probably be more like 40%. You know, there's a lot of different factors that play in. Private property lines stop us quite a bit. Could be weather, could be nightfall. There's just several factors that can play into not being able to get a recovery.
You had mentioned that you ask questions, and you guys have a great section on your website that has those facts that you need to know that will at least help you in your recovery mission.
Guys get into the moment. You kind of want to turn your mind into maybe a recorder as to what is actually happening. You know, I'd like to know what equipment you were using, how far the shot was, how the animal was standing when you took the shot. Was he quartering to? Was he quartering away? Was it perfectly broadside? Was he looking directly at you? And then the big question is how long did you wait once you took the shot to start tracking? Because that's a major factor. You know, I try to tell guys, if you take a broadside shot and with a bow and you double lung him, very rarely you're going to give me a call. A lot of times you're going to see the animal go down. As the arrow moves back, a liver shot or maybe you're way far back and you hit him, the animal right in front of the hams, in a gut shot. Those gut shots can be very recoverable if you give the animal time to expire. And I tell guys, on liver shots, I want them to wait at least 8 hours before you go in there and start tracking yourself. Maybe a shot a little bit farther back. Let's wait 12 to 24 hours before we go in there. And we'll usually find that animal within 200 to 400 yards of where you took the shot.
And we're talking with Scott Gillespie, Rocky Mountain Big Game Recovery. And we were talking at the beginning of our conversation here that there are up to 25 trackers that are out to help out. And in Wyoming, we have a really good number of trackers that are in state. So where you're in northern Colorado, if one of the trackers that you contact is right here in Wyoming, boy, that really cuts down on that response time, doesn't it?
When somebody calls me for a track, let's say I'm here in Wellington, Colorado, just south of Cheyenne. Let's say somebody calls me from Laramie Peak. That's a 3-4 hour drive for me to get up there. I might interview the hunter and determine whether it's a track that we possibly want to take. If I can't make it, all of us keep in contact. I will just send out a group text to all the trackers. Hey, I have a guy on Laramie Peak. I think his elk is probably dead. If anybody's interested in taking the track, here's his phone number. So if you call me and you're not just talking to me, you're talking to about 25 different trackers right now.
So when the initial contact is made, if they go to RockyMountainBigGameRecovery.org and make sure you have the numbers in your phone, make sure you have a checklist. You can download those, the questions you're going to ask them so that you can kind of go over that and answer the questions before they call in their mind so that they're prepared for you.
They're not going to get every question that I'm going to ask them, and I'm going to try to determine whether I think it's a fatal hit if we have time to come out there and possibly do the recovery. I mean, this isn't our full-time job. All of us trackers have regular jobs, so that's a major factor. You got to catch us at the right time to come out and do it. So, another big thing I want to kind of mention on the show here is if you're listening to this, if this is something that you're really interested in possibly doing, that's another thing we do with our Facebook page is trying to train, help other people train their dog and becoming a tracking team and joining the group.
Very cool stuff. Scott Gillespie, again, Rocky Mountain Big Game Recovery. Go to their website, which is RockyMountainBigGameRecovery.org. Get all the information that you need. And Scott, I do appreciate you being back on the show and continued success, and I hope you have a very eventful year.
Hey, I appreciate it, Drew.
Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors with Drew Kirby. If you have a question, want to make a comment, or have an idea for a show topic, message us on the My Country mobile app. Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.